Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I gel print with Greenery. I had leftover greens from a bouquet. What I'm looking for is plants that are flat. The leaves are flat. And if they're not perfectly flat, I show a little technique for making them flat. A quick press to make them so that they'll work on that gel plate. The key for working with the gel plate is to look for something that's not going to puncture your plate. So it can't have any little prickly parts or thorns. If it does, don't use it. You want to preserve the plate at all costs. This is a fun technique that results in a lot of detail, surprisingly so. So let's get started. So to start with, I have these leftover greens from a floral arrangement. As you can see, they're starting to go by. They're a little stiff. Ideally, I'd like to press them to make them as flat as possible. I also have these greens, just some leaves that were in the arrangement. So I'm going to show you how I kind of cheat instead of pressing them for days or whatnot. I get paper, heavyweight paper, or at least large enough paper to cover the images. And then I just take them and I'll either break them off or get rid of any stems that are too long, like this one. So I have just a few that fit on the paper nicely. Now this isn't a perfect specimen, but I can break it down or just use these little leaves here. I don't have to have it as a pristine, perfect image. Then I'll take another piece of paper to cover it and just gently set it onto that paper. And then I need a heavy book or an object to just make a quick press. So I have a book here. Just going to press that down. Again, it won't be perfectly flat. You can also use a rolling pin, but I'm just trying to make it ideal for the gel printing. And now it's pressed somewhat. They're not completely flat, but they're flat enough. I'll do the same thing with those rounded leaves. So now that my leaves are somewhat cleaned and pressed, I have my gel plate set up here, and I have a bunch of blank paper so that I can pull my prints. I also have two colors, and that's what I'm going to work with today. I have this deep violet and this purpley color. I don't see cobalt violet and a brayer. So I'm just going to take some of these colors, roll my brayer in them, and roll it onto my gel plate. I want to get a nice even coat. It's just a beautiful color. I'm going to add a little bit more of this cobalt violet. So pretty. So now I'll start with my ferns. I'm going to take them and arrange them however I want onto my wet plate. Very pretty here. Play around with it. I think I'll start with this one. Make sure it fits nicely. I'll even put in a few little pieces here and there. And now I'll take a piece of paper and press it down, holding it flat with one hand and then just pressing it with the other. Trying to cover the entire paper with whatever ink is around that fern. Again, I'm always holding one hand to prevent the paper from slipping and moving. Once I feel like I've got that area around that in place, I'll just continue pressing my paper. And now I'm just going to pick up this entire paper. So I have a beautiful result of just kind of a silhouette of those greens. I can remove my image, and I have paint on the back, which I think is pretty beautiful in itself. I might be able to pull a print off of those. But more importantly, I have a gorgeous image here with a lot of detail. So I'll take another piece of paper, gently set it down, and burnish it. Making sure to really burnish it and pick up all that image. And then when I remove it, I've got a gorgeous result here. So much detail. You can see there's a little bit of ink around it, so it's not like a photograph. It's just like a little bit of an artwork. Now let me show you a slight variation on this technique. I'm going to clean up my plate here. So for this technique, we'll do the same process where we have the gel plate and we roll our ink onto it. The brayer is nice because it gives a nice even coat. You can always paint it on with a brush, but the result isn't quite the same. So now I want to place my greens back on the piece, do a slight variation of design here. And now I'm going to take my paper and put it on the piece, but I want it to overhang. And the reason I want it to overhang, it can be on the bottom or the top, is I'm going to attach a strip of tape there. So I have my page, I'm holding it down, and you can see this little area where it will overhang from my plate. I'm just going to burnish it very quickly. Same technique, holding it in the center and burnishing all around the greens. And now that I think that's pretty well down, I'm going to take just some tape. This is just some painter's tape. And I'm trying to hold my paper in place. So again, with the one hand, I hold the paper down, and then I just tape my paper here. So now to make this technique a little different than the last one, I'm just going to pull that paper up like a hinge, and that will maintain the position of that paper. I'm not taking it all the way off, just off enough to remove these images, these leaves. And now I'm very carefully going to roll that paper down and catch that image again. So I'll have the background, and then I'll have that detailed image of the leaves. Now what I'm going to do differently this time is I'm going to let this dry on the plate so that my paper dries somewhat. So I can remove my tape gently now, and I'll just give this a little bit of time to dry. So it's been about 2 minutes. I can feel that my paper is still a little wet. It's a little heavy. I'm going to remove it anyway. This is the impatient part of gel printing. So I'm going to take my paper from the bottom and pull up. And here I have a gorgeous result with a background as well as the detail of the leaves. Whereas with the previous print, we had the detail of the leaves, or we had the background. So you can get a lot of variation with this technique. And lastly, I wanted to show you one more variation on this technique, and we're going to introduce a different color. For my final color, I'm going to use just a lighter version of that purple. I seem to want to stay with that family. So for here, I'm going to pick up that color and ink up my plate just like we did originally. Now I want to clean my brayer. I'm going to set this aside for a moment and just place my leaves down. And this time I'm going to use the flat leaves. I think I'm going to turn them this way. There we go. That one seems to be a little more in better shape. Again, I'm going to take my clean paper, just one sheet, press it down. Now I didn't leave a lot on top to make that hinge, but I did on the bottom. So I'll make that hinge on the bottom. I'm going to clean my brayer because I'm changing the color now. And now I'll put a little of that light blue violet onto my palette paper here and get my brayer ready. Now I'll remove the paper from the gel plate. I'll very carefully remove the leaves. And now I need to let this dry. Then I'm going to take my brayer, and I just want a little bit of that paint on it. And I'm going to brayer over all of the area here. I want a light layer. And come back in and add more as necessary. And now I'm going to take my paper that's on the hinge and press it right back down. And now I want to make sure that this layer dries. So before I let it dry, I'm going to burnish it well. And then I'm going to give it about 5 minutes to dry. So now that it's dry, I can peel up my paper very carefully. And I have a gorgeous result. I have that layer that I added over the other layers, and I still have some detail. Now you could alter that technique, that third technique as well, by not using the hinge technique, by just using a different layer. And I'll quickly just show you that. So I'll start this time by just setting my leaves down in the opposite format that I set them down before. And I'll take a piece of paper, again holding it down in the middle and burnishing it all around. I'll remove my paper. So I have that beautiful silhouette. And now I'll remove my stems. And I'll let this layer completely dry. Then once this is dried, I'll take another color and roll it over the image. And when you covered the image the way you like, just take a piece of paper, a new piece of paper, set it down, burnish it well, and let this piece dry. And when this is dry, you can take your paper, remove it from your gel plate, and you get a gorgeous result. So this is the image where I remove the background and use a fresh piece of paper. And this is the image where I use the hinge. So you can see slight differences in the color and the depth. There's a lot of fun that you can have using this technique with the gel plate. So I think it's always fun to go back and look at all the different results from the gel plate. So here's the original where I pressed it down and I removed the first paper, the first pull, and I got just the background. And then this is what I found when I pressed the paper the second time to pick up that really intricate detail of the ferns. And then here's the third time where we hinged it down so that we got the background as well as the detail. I think it's just stunning. So then I did the same technique, but with the flat leaves. And here's the background. And here's the hinged technique with the additional layer. Just beautiful. Here's another hinged layer with just a solid color. Same premise as that. And here's another one where I had just the silhouette and then the hinged background. Just stunning. I just think nature is so beautiful. You can't really copy it. And then here's one I did for my members, showing a little variation using color instead of a solid color. So this gel printing is just so much fun. So that's one technique for gel printing. I love to use all sorts of objects in gel printing, and you get such beautiful results. But with the results with this beautiful leaves, the details of those leaves, the veins and the ruffles and the shapes, whoa, can't beat it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And please consider becoming a paid member of my channel with insider videos, behind the scenes, and a look at my personal life. Thanks for joining me today.